The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brooks Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brooks Show on this Sunday afternoon, Sunday night. It's 8 o'clock over here. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend. It is 9/11, and it's however you cut it, it is kind of a sad day. Although it is a long time ago. It's 21 years. It's hard to believe. I still remember that day as if it was recent, but 21 years. A lot has happened. A lot has been forgotten. A lot of people have no clue. A lot of people were born after. So it's definitely good once a year. And I actually do this more than once a year because it turns out I talk about 9/11 often because it's such a, I think, monumental event in American history. But it is important once a year, I think, to remember, to reflect, and to think about lessons learned or not learned, lessons that should have been learned, and so on. So we will do that. We will do a little bit of that today. And talk about that. Update, just an update in terms of, I told you we'd start the show on good news. Well, the good news flowing out of Ukraine continues. The Russians are basically running away, leaving their equipment, leaving their tanks, leaving their logistics behind. They're in panic mode, running to the border. It is quite pathetic and also quite revealing of the state of Russian troops' morale, motivation, incentive for being there. Most of them, I think what the hell are they doing there? Ukraine has added, I think, a lot of the stuff I said yesterday, where I said we're not sure. Rumors suggest that they've reached this. Now it's pretty well established that they've reached these places. The Russian high command is acknowledging that they are leaving. They, of course, are claiming that they're leaving in an orderly manner and that they're leaving in order to strategically move their forces to better locations. But that's all, I think the technical term for that is bullshit. They are being defeated and they are trying to save face. They are obviously taking all their troops and putting them in the areas that they held in the south, and also that they are holding that they've held since 2014 in close to Donetsk. So yeah, the war in Ukraine is going about as well as it can be for the Ukrainians, which is interesting. What I find fascinating, I find the war fascinating in kind of a morbid kind of sense. Wars are horrible and awful and evil, and people are dying and people are suffering, and really, really bad stuff is happening. And the Russians are going to get nasty now, and they're going to bomb cities, and they've already bombed the power company in the power supply in Kharkiv, so that I think a quarter of the city or half the city is without power or water because the pumps there rely on electricity. But that's part of war. Why would you expect anything different? I do not believe that in war one should avoid, civilian infrastructure, civilian casualties. If you're the good guys, Russia, of course, the bad guys. So anything Russia does in the war is bad. So Russia in this case, yeah, they're going to do a lot of damage. They're going to try to lash out. They're angry. They're upset. Of course, when they send those missiles in, they're using cruise missiles or other types of missiles. Those missiles cost, I think it was $13 million a pop. They launched 11 of them today. 9 of them were knocked out of the sky by anti-aircraft defenses that the Ukrainians have, Western anti-defenses. So they're only 9 out of 11, I think. So only 2 of them made it to their targets. That's pretty bleak for the Russians, those kind of odds. particularly given how expensive they are, and particularly given the fact that they don't have the production capacity to build many more of these missiles. So they are going to run up against the limit. But anyway, I was talking about what actually particularly fascinates me about the war in Russia. And it's a phenomena that I don't think I would have ever known about, would have never really encountered in my life, if not for social media and if not for the fact that, you know, YouTube and everything, people can leave comments and engage in discussions and everything else. So what's fascinating to me is how many people are pro-Russia. How many people who, I think, subscribe to my channel or at least listen to my show are pro-Russia. It is astounding to me that the people who are pro-Russia, no matter what, are defending Russia, are claiming that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I am you just need to read the comment section under my videos, that I'm a mouthpiece of Ukrainian propaganda, that, you know, this is, that no, you know, now Russia's finally going to start fighting and going to crush Ukraine, that if the Russians really wanted to, they would have defeated Ukraine, as if in the first few days they didn't try to defeat Ukraine. I mean, the whole thing is a joke and ridiculous. But it truly is stunning, the number of these people who actually exist and the extent to which they take themselves seriously, and to the extent to which it doesn't matter how many facts you present in front of them. It doesn't matter what evidence you provide them. It doesn't matter what is right there in front of their eyes. They are convinced that Russia is winning, that Russia are the good guys, that Russia is the bastion of civilization and will rescue all of us from, I guess, the evils of the left, that anything that Biden administration supports and anything that Europe supports must be by definition evil and horrific and disgusting and horrible, and therefore, and it's, God, I don't know what to make of the phenomena. Of course, it's the same phenomena, and I know now some of you are going to get upset, but it's the same phenomena I observed with Trump. No matter what evidence you provided, no matter what facts on the ground existed, no matter what was going on, Trump was somehow the good guy. Trump was going to win. Trump was going to be president January 26th. No matter how many times, you know, he lost, and then after January 6th, he you know, the Congress didn't reappoint him, and Pence didn't do. No matter what happened, no, Trump is going to be president. He is the president. Facts don't matter. They have absolutely no relevance in their life. They have a perspective. They will defend their perspective to the death. They will distort reality. They will distort, you know, everything in their field of observation in order to justify, in order to affirm their preconceived conceptions. And you know, and the left does exactly the same thing. The socialists, you can show them socialism fails. You can show them examples. You can show them different types of examples and different types of errors in different cultures, in different societies, in different ways, and different all kinds of things. And it always fails. And no, socialism's good, and here's why. It doesn't. Like, facts, reality, evidence, logic, reason have zero impact on them. And to some extent, I've always known this exists on the left, because I've always fought the socialists and argued with the socialists and combated the socialists and everything. But until Trump, I didn't see the same phenomena on the right, and I didn't see it. I didn't see that it was basically the same mindlessness. The same mindlessness. A lot of people who for years and years and years I thought kind of basically agreed with me, turns out they didn't. They held ideas that were similar to mine, but they held those ideas completely unconnected to reality, completely divorced from facts and evidence and anything related to reality. And therefore, they didn't hold those ideas. And then once there was something that caused a diversion. And I think we'll talk about, I think that already happened in 9/11, but I didn't know the extent of it because there was a lot of people who I didn't understand what the hell they were talking about 9/11. After 9/11, the position they took was just bizarre. But it turns out that I didn't know because I didn't have access to all the different people who responded differently to 9/11 because there was no social media. Today, the response to 9/11 would be far more diverse and radicalized and confrontational and contradictory and problematic. If it happened today in a world with social media, and I would have been a lot more aware of it. At the time, I wasn't aware of how many people disagreed, and how deep those disagreements were. So it's another aspect of 9/11 that is we commemorate today, is that it happened in a time before social media, and I think everything about 9/11 would have been different with social media and with the world we have today. Well, the world we have today is somewhat shaped by 9/11, as we'll talk about, but certainly it's also shaped by social media in a way that 9/11, the response to it, was not shaped by social media, for what it's worth. But it really is fascinating to me. The people who, no matter what facts, no matter what the Russians even admit, it doesn't matter. Russia is winning. I mean, literally, the Ukrainians could be, putting up the flag on top of the Kremlin, and the supporters of Russia would be saying, no, this is a trick. The Russians are tricking the Ukrainians. They're going to get them. This is all just a trick. It's amazing to me, the unwillingness of people to think, to literally engage in cognition, in identification of the facts of reality, and coming to conclusions based on those facts. All right, Vadim, thank you. Really, really appreciate the support. That's $100 or $99.99. Really appreciate that. No question, I take it, but that's great. Ryan, thank you too for the support, also with not a question. Ryan is also a 7-month member, one of the first, I think, members, and he reminds us to don't forget to like the show before you leave. And the thing about the people in Russia and the people, some people who support Trump and some people who support the left and all of this, is not that they're stupid. These are not stupid people. They're not low IQ people. They're not dumb people. They're not simple people. They have decided in particular areas of their life to evade, to completely ignore reality, to ignore facts, and just be mindless. So it's not about this. If they were just stupid, then who cares? Then they're just stupid. It's that they're not stupid that makes it so shocking and so surprising still, and will for a long time, I guess, surprise me, because I have a benevolent view of people, will continue to shock me and surprise me. And some of them are on our chat. So, they're on here regularly, or they many of them have left because they were on, you remember they were on in January 2021 telling me that Biden was never going to be president. He was never going to be. And I said, if you're right, I will apologize. I will say I was wrong and apologize. But if you're wrong, I want you to come back on the show and on the chat and admit you were wrong. And not a single one of them ever did that. They're all gone. They're all disappeared. And some of the Russian supporters have disappeared from our channel as well. And my guess is as Russia is clearly defeated, many more of them will disappear. And I guess they keep chatting among themselves, trying to figure out what went wrong or why, there is this alternative parallel universe in which they were right and why we were all wrong. Anyway, it's an interesting phenomena. Lack of thinking lack of acceptance of facts of reality, even at the most basic level, is truly interesting. But this, you shouldn't take anything I say seriously, because ultimately all I am is a vehicle for the Ukrainian government propaganda machine. All I do is recite to you what I hear and what the Ukrainians ask me. I hope they pay me well. I really do hope they pay me well. Patriot Pete just posted something really good. So it's not a super chat. It should be a super chat. It's not a super chat. It's in the chat, but it's worthy of a petition because it's actually really good. He writes, the Russian army losing so badly that Putin is at risk of losing the support of the Republican Party. That's really good. I thought it would just be a conventional thing. Oh, Putin's losing the support of the Russian people or losing the support of the Kremlin or something like that. But no, he's at risk of losing the support of Tucker Carlson. He might actually lose Tucker Carlson and the rest of the Republican Party. What will he do then? All right. That was funny. Who is it? Who said that? Patriot Pete. Cool. All right. So, as you know, I will do my spiel on 9/11 in a few minutes. But as you know, you guys get to dictate much of the program and what we talk about on the show. You can do so with the super chat. You can ask questions. You can ask big questions, small questions. You can ask questions on anything. I see a number of questions already on 9/11. That is great. Or on Russia. That would be great. So any of those kind of questions that relate to the topics we talked about on the show would be fantastic and appreciated. But you can really ask questions about anything. So feel free to jump in with those. And 9/11. So 9/11, I think, will go down as one of those real moments in which history shifted, in which it will be one of those moments in the decline of America that is going to be noted and remembered, and historians will study and try to understand what and how and explain it. It is, of course, we know, and we've discussed often, that ultimately ideas shape history. And there's no question, we'll talk about this, that ideas shaped America's response to 9/11. But existentially, what happens, things like wars, things like a terrorist attack on the scale of 9/11, things like particular elections or particular responses, they accelerate or slow down particular historical processes. They're not determining of the decline, the rise or decline, but they are accelerants, or they slow down the rise, the kind of inevitable rise and decline that is driven by ideas. So while ideas give you the broad framework of the direction a culture is heading in, the specifics, how it declines, speed of its decline, the particular way in which it declines, ultimately determined by the people, the facts, the events, if you will, on the ground. On the ground. And certainly this is the case of 9/11. Now, America has been in decline for a long time. Certainly, by certain measures, economic freedom, certainly, America's been in decline for about 100 years. That decline was slowed down a little bit, maybe by Ronald Reagan, but then accelerated later on by compassionate conservative George Bush. But of course, George Bush's whole term was to a large extent determined by 9/11. But the economic decline of America, economic liberty, is really being set in place by the progressives, by progressive ideas, with ideas of collectivism and altruism and socialism, and just a rejection of the ideas of the founding fathers, the idea of individualism and of individual rights. In other fronts, liberty and freedom have increased in the United States over a certain period of time. But generally, the ideas of our intellectuals, the ideas at the forefront of our culture, have been, for the most part, in decline, with, I think, a slight reversal during the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, but then a continuation of that decline. And those ideas are basically being shaped by the left, by ideas coming out of the left as manifest in the progressive movement, started in the mid-19th century and ongoing into the 20th century. That progressive movement has become more radicalized by postmodernism that has ultimately morphed into kind of the hippies of the new left, the rejection of traditional Marxism, and basically an embrace of pure subjectivism, pure emotionalism, and which has reverted into what we have today, which is critical race theory and DEI and ESG and doomsday climate change and all the rest of it. Those are the ideas at the forefront. And one of the great tragedies, the fundamental tragedy of America is that the people who position themselves as the defenders of the ideas of the founding, which means the ideas of individualism, of individual rights, of capitalism, of freedom, of liberty, the people who position themselves as the defenders of that, as the lovers of our history and our founding fathers and in our institutions and our documents and our Constitution, the people who position themselves defending that have no clue what those ideas are based on. The great tragedy is that the people who position themselves to defend all that are not men of enlightenment, but are men of regression. They are conservatives. Conservatives have always opposed the radical nature of the formation of the United States of America. I mean, real conservatives. America was radical. America was a big change. America was a big shift. And it didn't fit. So we're left with religionist conservatives to defend a radical, fundamentally secular, fundamentally individualist revolution. We're left with the William F. Buckleys of the world, and he's the best among them, to defend a revolution that was completely foreign to William F. Buckley's mentality. So the right basically left open to the left to have influence over the culture and the policy, the fundamental policy issues of America. So come 9/11, and what are the dominant ideas guiding American politicians and really guiding the nation? Well, religion is important. The president, George W. Bush, was an evangelical, a born again. Religion played a central part in his life and played a central part in American life. In addition to religion, or hand in hand with religion, America had embraced, at least explicitly, if not completely implicitly, the idea of altruism, the idea of turning the other cheek, the idea of not being too self-interested, not being too selfish, of loving thy enemy, or at least, if you don't love them, not being too harsh with them. The idea that the purpose of a great country like America is to serve others. Remember, George W. Bush won an election, just barely, if you remember, against Al Gore, against a real leftist, and he won running on a platform of compassionate, altruistic, collectivistic conservatism. Compassionate conservatism. So altruism combines with religion and respect for religion, admiration for religion, and of course a declining confidence in the greatness of America, declining confidence in the specialness of America, because if America is built on individualism, if America built on liberty and freedom and on capitalism or the respect for individual rights, and yet we've spent 150 years undermining individualism, undermining individual rights, and certainly undermining capitalism, then what's so special about America? These are false ideas, fake ideas, nonsensical ideas. So there's a certain, lack of confidence among Americans. Leading up to 9/11 for 20 years, America is humiliated in the Middle East, humiliated by terrorists, whether it's the taking by embassy in 79, we do nothing, the murder of 244 Marines in their barracks in Beirut, we do nothing, the kidnapping and murder of Americans in Lebanon and other places around the world by Iranians, we do nothing. The slaughter of Americans in Saudi Arabia, in a Marine barrack, the slaughter of Americans in embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, the slaughter of Americans, I forget the name of the ship, the Cole, I think it was, the killing of Americans over and over and over and over again, in this case by Islamists, over and over and over again. Americans don't seem to care. They talk and they do nothing. I mean, America by 2001, by September 11th, was a shell of itself. It was a country that did not stand up for itself, was not proud of itself. And the reason I'm rehashing this history is because so many people don't know history. And certainly, very few people know, so many people were not even born in 9/11. So many young people have no idea. Yeah, 244 Marines in Beirut is 2s and 5s and 10s. That's right. The Marine barrack, the barracks in Saudi Arabia, I forget the number of people who died there. Yeah, 2s and 5s and 10s. I mean, Richard, I don't know why you persist. You're so full of shit that it's hard to imagine why you persist. And America did nothing. The job of the American government, the job of any government, is to protect its own citizens, protect the life and property of its own people. And yet, America did not protect its own people, defaulted on protecting its own people. And then came 9/11, and the country was shocked. It was shocked because not just 3,000 people were killed, murdered, it was how it was done, the theatrical nature of it, the size of it, the scale of it. The scale was enormous. The audaciousness of it. The fact that they were willing to attack the heart of our most important, maybe the world's most important city. The fact that they were willing to attack New York. The Pentagon, a symbol of American military power, was helpless as a plane descended into it. Fourth plane, heading, who knows, to Houses of Congress or to the White House, luckily was stopped, so we don't exactly know, right, what the damage it could have caused. So 9/11 woke America up. Flags came out. People demanded action. Everybody declared themselves a patriot. America, they said, was indeed exceptional. But exceptional in what? The response to 9/11 revealed all the ideas that were at the heart of America leading up to 9/11. We couldn't identify the enemy. We refused to name him. We refused to say that it was Islamists, that it was Islamic totalitarians, it was Islamic terrorists, because God forbid, we do not want to offend Muslims. We don't want to offend a religion. We're religion. Religion is peaceful. And Islam, George W. Bush, right after 9/11, in front of all of Congress, declared Islam is, after all, a religion of peace. And so, religion prevented Bush, prevented the American people, prevented our leaders from daring to name Islam as the culprit. I mean, imagine how the world would be different if we had announced unequivocally that it was Islamist, that it had to do with Islam, that these were militant Islamists, they were going to be demolished, they were going to be destroyed, that we were not going to be hide. I mean, Bush, for 1 week, you can go check this out. For 1 week, he tried out, and this is relatively late, he tried out the term Islamofascists. And then he backed down because everybody was opposed to him using it. Now, there's no way that does not come from the fact that Bush and everybody surrounding him and the people influencing him were all religious, were all Christians. And God forbid you associate an act of violence, an act of terrorism with religion. That is unforgivable. You cannot do that. So let's cower before the Muslims and pretend that it wasn't them. So we never named the enemy. We launched a war on terrorism. Can't have a war on an ism. On terrorism. Which terrorism? Like terrorism in Peru? Terrorism in Cambodia? Which terrorism? Well, we can't say the word Islam, so it can't be Islamic terrorism. And then we launched wars. A war in Afghanistan, a war in Iraq. Not primarily to defeat, crush, eliminate, destroy, annihilate our enemies. No, you can't use any of those words. But we launched a war to bring democracy to the Middle East. We launched a war to civilize Afghanistan. We launched wars to bring food and aid packages. I remember that some of the first bombings of Afghanistan by the United States, you would have B-52s bombing, and then airplanes coming in and dropping food packages, and bombing and food packages. Yeah, let's feed the enemy before we kill them. Or maybe we feed them after we kill them. I'm not sure what order that goes in. But the idea of actually going in and destroying, devastating, defeating the people who need defeating, that's inconceivable. That would be too selfish. That would be too self-interested. See, so the full blossoming of altruism manifest in the response to 9/11. And we're still in the Middle East. We're not in Afghanistan anymore. We're still in the Middle East nation building. We're still trying somehow to salvage Iraq and to salvage Syria and to do something. Scott Horton is clueless. Sorry. So our policy is completely altruistic, completely self-sacrificial, completely divorced for what is necessary for American self-defense, was necessary for American protection of individual rights. America responded. Yeah, Scott Horton will destroy Bill Kristol and Kathy Young in debate, but Scott Horton is clueless when it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to what actually happened, when it comes to actual motivations, and when it comes to actually understanding the Middle East. But that's okay. I mean, it's par for the course, right? As I said, almost nobody out there understands the Middle East. Almost nobody out there. I don't think he's better than Crystal and Young. I think he's worse than Crystal and Young. He just defeated them in a debate. That's a different skill set than actually knowing. He is a lot more ignorant than both Crystal and Kathy Young are about the Middle East. But they're all wrong. I've disagreed with Bill Kristol in the Middle East from day one. I disagree with Bill Kristol on about pretty much everything. He's a neocon. I wrote a book condemning neocons. I did articles and lectures condemning neocons. Neocons got the wars that they wanted. Neocons fought the wars that the way they wanted to fight them. And the result that we've got is a result of the neocons. Nobody tried my policies. Nobody has the balls to have my policies. So 9/11 really revealed the emptiness of America, the emptiness of American patriotism, the emptiness of American nationalism in the positive sense of caring about America and wanting America to be successful. Empty. Won't name the enemy, won't fight wars to win, fighting the wrong wars to big democracy. Who cares about democracy in the Middle East? You're supposed to stop and annihilate the people trying to kill you. American government supported the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. That was Obama administration. They've done everything in their power. Everything in their power. They gave suitcases of cash to the Sunnis in Iraq, cash that was later used to form ISIS. Everything in America's power to broaden, to strengthen Islamists in the Middle East. Everything in our power to embolden them. Indeed, we've given them Afghanistan back, handed to them on a silver platter. We've given the Iranians Iraq, although they're finding Iraq a bit of a mess. We've given the Iranians Syria and Lebanon. We let ISIS slaughter people in Europe, not in the US, some in the US, but mainly there. If you want to ask me a question about people, about events, about things, there's a super chat feature. Everybody else is participating. Kyle, you can too. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You can ask a question about anybody and anything. I know sometimes I ask stuff in spite of the fact that it's not done in a super chat, but it's not fair. Other people are putting their money where their mouth is. You can too, if you care. And if you don't care, what are you doing here? $2. You can do it for $2. So the altruism, the selflessness, the religiousness of America made it weak, made it unable to deal with 9/11. And the way our government dealt with it was by lying to us, by creating fictions, creating excuses. You remember weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? As I said at the time, why does it make a difference if Iraq has weapons of mass destruction? Let's say they do. They have massive quantities of chemical weapons that they're using on their own people, which they did for a while. They used on the Kurds. Why is it our business? Syria. When I was in the Israeli army, in military intelligence, we knew that Syria had chemical weapons. They had chemical weapons. And yet, did that mean that the United States should invade Syria and take those chemical weapons away from them? Why is it any of our business? Indeed, the Syrians used the chemical weapons against their own insurgents, in their own civil war. But is that our business that a bad guy has chemical weapons? No, not unless they're planning to use it on Americans. Why ever go to Iraq and lie to the American people about the reason you're going? I mean, you could argue the reason was to bring democracy to the Middle East. I think they were serious about that, the neoconservatives were. Maybe it was about finishing a war that they started 10 years earlier under Bush the first, and they wanted to see it through finally. Saddam was an awful, sadistic, horrible, disgusting human being. And not one American soldier should die in order to get rid of him. He was the responsibility of the Iraqis. Now, I'm not against wars. I'm against wars of self-sacrifice. I'm against wars against people who are not our enemies or not our explicit, threatening enemies. The war should have been waged against Iran. It should have been waged against Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. But Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Iraq had nothing to do with the many terrorist attacks against the United States. Saudi Arabia was funding terrorists in those days, funding the schools, funding the madrasas where they studied the ideology that led to terrorism. Qatar, United Arab Emirates in those days were all funding the terrorists, funding Al-Qaeda, ultimately funded ISIS. They were the enemy. But Iraq was on nothing. By the way, American troops are still in Iraq and in Syria. One of the great myths of the Trump administration is they never brought our troops home, not from Afghanistan, and not from Syria, and not from Iraq. We still have troops there. So 9/11 revealed the American government as weak, as deceptive, as manipulative. It manipulated our patriotic feelings in order to pretend that it was doing something in our favor. "9/11 revealed that we were a paper tiger, that we would not really fight, that we were going to lose more wars as we lost in Afghanistan. It's not only Russia that's a paper tiger, so is America. And it revealed our politicians as cowards and liars. And I think it is the beginning of the real distrust. Distrust. Americans have always been skeptical about government, skeptical about politicians, didn't really trust them that much. But I think there was a real shift during Bush's presidency, a real shift. It was 9/11 and the financial crisis that completely demolished our trust in the, quote, elites, in the experts. The experts told us, oh, Iraq will become democratic and bring change all over the Middle East. The experts told us, oh, America's going to win this war and turn Afghanistan into this wonderful place. The expert told us that, oh, these wars were going to be quick, easy, and Al-Qaeda was just going to disappear. We're going to get Bin Laden, and all of that was going to just happen. We were told it wasn't Muslims, it wasn't Islam, even though we all knew it was. Not Muslims, not Islams, don't worry, it's not religion. God forbid it can't be religion. How scary would it be if it was religion? And the consequence of this is that the American people lost all trust, all faith in politics, in elites, in talking heads. And they absorbed this idea that we're cowards, our politicians are cowards, and they absorbed the idea that America did not place its own interests as primary. And this explains the popularity of the American First slogan and the American First, because it has no content. There's no content to the America First idea that they're talking about. They don't know what it means to have an America First, partially because they don't know what America is, but they don't understand enough to know what that is. But it sounds good, and it sounds the opposite of what we did in 9/11. In 9/11, we placed the interest of Afghans in front of our own, Afghan civilians in front of our own when we didn't bomb the hell out of Afghanistan. We placed the interest of Iraqis and Syrians and everybody else ahead of our own. So America First sounds like a good slogan until you discover how empty it is of any kind of content. By the way, I've told this story before, but you know that the original attack, the initial bombings an initial attack of the United States on Afghanistan was called Operation Infinite Justice. And as the planes are heading towards Afghanistan to launch Operation Infinite Justice, the Saudis complained to the Bush administration that infinite justice, only Allah has infinite justice. How dare the United States use a term like infinite justice to fight good, solid Muslims? And what did the Bush administration do? Tell them to go to hell? No, it changed the name of the operation. And note that the war against Iraq was not called Operation Defend America, Operation Kill the Bad Guys. It was called God, Iraqi freedom. Right? I don't think we needed to bomb the Saudis. The Saudis would have caved if we just threatened and put a little bit of pressure on them. They would have caved. But we did nothing. They were our friends. They were our allies. When we formed the coalition of the willing, you remember that? The coalition of the willing to go after Iraq. The one country we excluded, the one country that the United States explicitly excluded from the coalition of the willing was Israel. Why? Not to offend the Arabs. Not to offend the Arabs, so we can't have Israel. Another sign of weakness, just pathetic. So in many ways, 9/11 is when Americans realized that the ideas that we have are empty. They're futile, they're nonsense. In a sense, the left has been chipping away and undermining and chipping away at America since the progressives. And they kept on doing that. They were consistent. They kept on. But what happened to the right and to kind of the center, kind of patriotic Americans who still believed in America, is that they were the ones who became disenchanted. They were the ones who gave up. And they were the ones who actually fell for the empty slogans of an America First nothingness. And a hatred of the elite for being an elite, hatred of experts for being experts, lump everybody in, but all because of 9/11. Now, I also think financial crisis had a big part to play from an economics perspective, but certainly 9/11 from a perspective on America and what America is and what it stands for, what it represents. I think it was 9/11. And I think that turned America. And we're living with the consequence today. We're living with the consequence today, the consequence being Obama and Trump and, pathetic Biden and the complete capitulation of America. And I don't know how America will recover. And what's interesting is that while we've got a lull in terrorism, generally the Islamists seem to be quiet. They have taken a real beating. ISIS has taken a real beating, I think, primarily from the Russians, more so than from the Americans in Syria. And the Kurds were very good at killing ISIS in Syria. The Al-Qaeda is taking a beating. We have managed to kill off its leadership. And the Muslim Brotherhood, while victorious in Egypt, and actually gained American support in Egypt, then was defeated in Egypt and now is suppressed by the authoritarian regime of Sisi, General Sisi in Egypt. And yet they are still there. The ideology has not gone away. Even in Africa, we hear less and less about them. They at some point, they grew and they grew and they grew and they succeeded and they achieved things, and then it all collapsed on them. ISIS collapsed. And in Africa, they reached a certain limit that they couldn't go no more, and they collapsed. But they're still there. They're still teaching the same lessons. They still view the West as unbelievably weak, although maybe a victory over Russia will change that. They view America as weak. Certainly our pathetic retreat from Afghanistan shows them that that is true. And they're taking their time. One of the things you can say about the Islamists is they have, their perspective is a perspective of generations, not a perspective of years. They're taking their time. They're building up. They're recruiting new people. You know, Boko Haram is still out there, but it is weak. Much lower profile than it was a few years ago when ISIS was at its peak. All of these organizations are just Al-Shabaab in Somalia. They're all just lower profile, quiet, building up. Of course, now with the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, they now have a new home, a new base of operations. They're playing the very long game. They're out there. They'll wait. Nothing's urgent for them. They will take their time. There will be Islamic terrorism in the future. And who knows how we'll respond then? Who knows? We're so pathetic and weak that it's so hard to tell. It's so hard to tell. So the enemy's still out there. It's been subdued. We've done enough to subdue it. Not enough to destroy it and wipe it out. Not enough to destroy it and wipe it out. All right. Nothing positive here. But this is the battle. The battle is to reimagine what America is. The battle is to remind Americans of what we used to think America was and to give it content. To return America to the land of individualism. To return America to the land of liberty, a land of freedom, the land of individual rights. To return America to its Declaration of Independence, to its Constitution. Maybe it's too late. Maybe it's over. But then, I don't know why we're wasting our time. And I don't think it's over. I don't think it's too late. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. And if you think it is, what are you doing here? But that's the only hope. The only hope is to educate Americans about what this country really is and what its potential really is. And doing that by showing them its great achievements. This is a great country, the greatest country in human history. But the achievements are all the consequences of its virtues, its real virtues. Not religion, not altruism, not collectivism, not statism. Its real virtues. And that's going to take a long time, and that's going to take a lot of work, and that's going to take a lot of allies to help us, and God, there's almost nobody out there to help us. That's the depressing thing. Depressing thing is when I read the comment section and all the apologists for Russia and the apologists for all the bad ideas out there. They so outnumber the good guys that it makes it very difficult to be optimistic about our potential in the future. But that's what we fight for. And this is something Joe wrote, and this is something that I completely disagree with. With Saddam in power, there's no ISIS. With Gaddafi in power, there's no modern-day slave trade between Middle East and African continent. In the West, who benefits? Notice that that's just not true about it. With Gaddafi in power. There was an active slave trade between the Middle East and African continent. With Gaddafi in power, a plane exploded above Scotland a plane that was, as a consequence of a terrorist attack, sponsored by Gaddafi. With Gaddafi there generating oil money, the worst terrorists in the world were getting funding. Were getting funding to attack us. With Saddam Hussein in power, there was no ISIS, sure, but there was funding for lots of other terrorist organizations, maybe not directly to Al-Qaeda, but certainly to Hamas and Hezbollah and a lot of others. And there was always the potential of him doing something worse. Again, I don't think that necessitates our invasion of Iraq. But to pretend that the world is somehow a better place with these monsters in power is delusional and is detached from reality. It's detached from the real world. It's to pretend on a scale and with people that you don't understand and events. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that libertarians do. I'm not saying Joe is a libertarian, but this is the kind of stuff libertarians do. They have no conception of the real world. They have no conception of the monsters out there. They have no conception of what people will do and won't do. They have no conception of what actually happens in the real world, particularly outside of the United States. They can pretend and be delusional. But yeah, we neutered Gaddafi somewhat in '86, but that's only because, I mean, imagine if we'd killed him then. That would have been the right thing to do. I think we tried. We killed his kids or whatever. We should have killed him. But no, often a power vacuum is great because a power vacuum creates an opportunity for the bad guys to start killing each other, and they're so busy killing each other that they don't have time for us. I'm not saying we should have gone to Libya. Libya was not a war the United States had any interest in being in. And we can talk about, isn't it 10 years since Benghazi, Hillary Clinton's Benghazi? I mean, I don't know how much you guys know about Benghazi, but Benghazi is just another example of and here Hillary Clinton is just the same as Bush and Rumsfeld and all these bastards. Benghazi is just an example of just the incompetence and the stupidity and the weakness of America. And just the non-existence of any kind of coherent foreign policy. I did a show on Benghazi. But Benghazi basically was, we sent an ambassador to Libya when there's chaos, when there's anarchy. Right? Why are we sending an ambassador? Who cares about ambassadors? Why do we have a diplomatic mission in Libya when it's in the middle of a civil war and when there's no rule of law and when all you have is militant gangs fighting each other? And then when he gets in trouble, we refuse to launch airplanes to go bomb the people who are trying to attack him because, God forbid, there's civilians there. They might get hurt. So 4 Americans, the ambassador and 3 of his security personnel, get slaughtered by the masses because we won't launch, because we're afraid. We're afraid to win. We're afraid to fight. We're afraid to hurt anybody. We're afraid to be condemned. I mean, why are we in Libya? Why did we ever go to Libya? Why did we ever engage in a war? I mean, the Europeans wanted to take Gaddafi out. Fine, let the Europeans do it. Why did we go to Libya? Why would we engage in Libya? But why did we have an ambassador in Libya? God, I don't think we should have an ambassador in half the countries we have ambassadors in. But in a country in a state of war, it just is completely absurd and ridiculous. But it wasn't Hillary. I mean, Hillary was just acting like I think almost any foreign secretary would act. There's nothing unusual about Hillary. How many American State Department people would have launched the attack to save those guys. I don't think any of them. All right. Okay, Catherine, you've got your job. You got your job cut out for you. We're still short about $377. We're running out of time here. We've got a few Super Chat questions. We're going to start going over them. Yeah. All right, let's see. Let's see if we've got some questions about... let's see if we get some stuff about... all right. Okay, friend Harper says, I'm looking for 9/11 related questions first. Last year, 9/11 video with Ankar and Ilan was an excellent video. I agree. Thought I would bump it for newer listeners. The comprehensive analysis of the events leading up to 9/11 was a lot of the stuff I'd never heard of. Yes, it's an excellent video, but I would recommend it. I'd also recommend Ilan Jono's book that he edited, Winning the Unwinnable War. I have 3 essays in that book that I think are really, really, really important essays that in terms of the conceptual shaping of our foreign policy in the future. I also recommend Leonard Peikoff's lecture that he did in Fort Hall Forum, which a lot of people ignore, but you shouldn't, called Americans versus America. This is just before the invasion of Iraq, and he talks about the weakness of America and the shallowness of the American response to 9/11 and why it was so horrific. So I definitely recommend Leonard Peikoff's Americans versus America. I'd also recommend, maybe somebody can actually take these recommendations down and add them to the comment section. That would be great if you listed these. So Ilan and Ankar's video, Leonard Peikoff's video, the book, Winning the Unwinnable War, America versus Americans. Sorry, America versus Americans. And then I did, 3, 4, 5 lectures, and I did some of them. One of them, which is online, was to the Air Force Intelligence Center, so to the military in, I think, 2003, about my perspective on the war. So somebody in the military valued my perspective on the war and what I had to say about the war. But a number of others, there are probably 4 or 5 of my lectures on 9/11, on neoconservatism. I did a lecture 1 year after 9/11. I did one, I think, 2 years after. All of those videos, if you want to see what we had to say right after that, right after 9/11, in the months, years, particularly in the years after 9/11, I think what you'll find is that, shockingly, I was right, again. Almost everything I predicted in those talks came to be, almost everything, which is pretty... Anyway, I've been right about Russia, but I was also, more importantly, right about 9/11 and the consequence of 9/11. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Liam says, did you think societal breakdown would come from 9/11? Were you anticipating some kind of nuclear or chemical attack? I was not expecting a chemical or nuclear attack. I actually believed that what we were doing after 9/11 was enough to at least suppress direct attacks on the United States. That it wasn't enough to end, and it wasn't enough to actually silence and to stop the terrorists. And we saw I actually predicted, in a sense, the rise of ISIS. But I did not think at the time there would be nuclear or chemical attacks, and they haven't been. I did not think there would be a serious terrorist attack on the United States for at least 10 years. It's turned out to be 21 years. There were sporadic attacks. There were lone kind of wolf attacks inspired by Islamists, but there was anything close to 9/11-like attack since 9/11, and I anticipated that. Did I think society breakdown? I thought that it represented a real, and Leonard Peikoff in America versus Americans says this, that it represented a real break, that it represented a real step down in terms of American society, American culture, and America's view of itself. The way exactly it led to where we are today politically and the attitude of Americans towards one another, no, I don't think I expected that, right? I don't think I expected or foresaw that in particular. Another book by Ilan Journo, Failing to Confront Totalitarian Islam, has essays by Ilan and by Ankar. But again, there's a ton of content. I wrote, and I wrote a number of essays. I think my best essays are essays I wrote post 9/11 on the foreign policy situation. The Just War Theory essay, I think, is an important essay and will go down as an important essay. If you want to understand my views on foreign policy, that is an essay you have to read. That and the one on neoconservatism, and the one on forward strategy of freedom, Bush's forward strategy of freedom. I had an essay and a lecture disagreeing with that. I did a number of panels. I did a number of events with Daniel Pipes. Daniel Pipes was one of the best voices post 9/11, one of the few good voices post 9/11, other than objectivists. So he was a good friend in those days. I find myself disagreeing with him more and more today, but in those days I thought he was very good. He's become, I think, unsurprisingly, more cynical and therefore more open to kind of the authoritarian right. Hopper Campbell, was the reaction to COVID worse than the destruction from 9/11? No, I don't think so. I mean, in many respects, the reaction to COVID was it was surprising in how bad it was, but it was the outcome of everything that came before it. It was the outcome of 9/11, the outcome of the financial crisis, the outcome of the just mindlessness and spinelessness of the American people. So 9/11, I think, was worse in a sense, not of economic destruction. COVID was worse in the sense of economic destruction, but a sense of revealing the soul of America and the horror of that revelation and the consequence of that to the speeding up of American decline. That is much bigger than COVID, I think. Let's see. No. I'm looking. I'm looking for questions on 9/11. Yeah, Bree says there was no consequence of the Islamic intellectuals, so killing the bad guys has no effect. They can still make more bad guys. Yes, I mean, you have to root it out the source, partially by identifying the source, and then by, destroying the source. And that means destroying the intellectual foundation intellectually and destroying the capacity to reproduce these intellectuals by starving the madrasas and destroying the places where these ideas or making sure they're not funded. There's no funding for these ideas to propagate around the world. We did the opposite. So, and that's what we should have gone after the Saudis and the Iranians, for basically expanding this and propagating this. Richard says, government won't focus. The war on terror should have been the hunt for Al-Qaeda. Well, it should have been more than that. It should have been the hunt for the Islamists. It should have been Al-Qaeda and anybody who is going to use Islam to come after Americans. And that would have included Iran and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad and a number of Islamist organizations. It should have been the war on Islamism, or a war on the countries and the organizations that represent Islamism, Al-Qaeda being one of them. Richard says, I hope this super chat saves me from Catherine Mendez's cat of nine tails. I don't even know what that means. But I assume Catherine's giving you a hard time for not. All right, Let's see. All right. Let's see if there are any ones that have to do with Russia. Okay, Adam says, were big national theocratic pro-Putin parties in Ukraine and Poland vanished when, did they vanish when Russia invaded? Analog parties in Hungary and Austria are still in power. Is it because they once ruled Western Ukraine, or is it ideas? Well, I think I think in Poland and Ukraine, the pro-Russian parties vanished because, particularly in Poland, because they could see, because those parties were nationalist parties. They were pro-Russia in the sense that they wanted to be like Russia. They liked the authoritarian nature of Putin. They supported the kind of nationalism that Putin embodied. But once they saw Putin's willingness to go to war, once they understood the implications for their own countries, I think they, particularly in Poland, they shifted to being anti-Russia. And it'll be interesting to see in 5 years, if Russia is defeated, where those political parties land up. But the ruling party in Poland was relatively pro-Russia. But it was also, it was pro-Russian model, not pro-Russia. And what they really are scared of is Russian occupation. They remember the Soviet Union. They are nationalists. They want their Polish state. They're not good guys, the people running Poland. But they at least understand that they do not want to be ruled by Russians. They don't want Russians occupying them. They remember way too well what it was like under the Soviet Union. They remember that it was that Stalin and Hitler started World War II, not just Hitler. And so they are reluctant. In Hungary, they're not afraid of being occupied, right? They don't have a border with Russia. And Hungary's trying to have it both ways. Hungary voted for the sanctions with the European Union, supported the sanctions in the European Union, was anti-Russia with the European Union, but also is saying, oh, we should have a negotiated peace, oh, we should. So they're trying to have it both ways because, partially because they get a lot of their energy from Russia, and partially because Orban has gotten a lot of support from Putin in the past, financial and otherwise, and because of Orban ideologically, intellectually, philosophically, is aligned with Putin. So the Poles aligned with Putin on a lot of things, but are nationalists and therefore want the Russians away. The Hungarians aligned with Putin, are less afraid of Russia taking over Hungary and therefore are willing to be friendlier with the Russians. But and Austria, the same thing. They are nationalist, authoritarian type parties that are doing this. I would, Joe, I would never call it a war with Islam. I think, and I've said this many times since 9/11, a war with Islam is a really, really bad idea because it's not a war with Islam. You're fighting a particular political manifestation of Islam. There is no war against religion. You're fighting those people who want to use Islam to go to war. Not every Muslim does. So it's distracting. It's not that I'm pro-Islam. It's distracting. It's not strategically useful to identify Islam as the enemy. Is Malaysia an Islamic country? Is it the enemy? No, because it's not ruled by Islamists. Is Yemen an enemy country? No, partially because it's too poor to be involved in anything. Who is the enemy? Those countries that fund and support and make possible, and those organizations that execute on an Islamist vision of world domination. And that's not all of Islam. That's some people within Islam. And the more you can differentiate, the more focused your war becomes, rather than Islam. Oh, does that mean the Muslims in my neighborhood are the enemy? Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Depends. Are they secularized Muslims? Are they pro-American Muslims? Are they assimilated Muslims? Or are they Islamists? Well, if they're Islamists, they're the enemy, and they should be watched. If they're not, then they're not. So it's really useful if you're going to go to war. War is expensive. War is expensive in life. War is expensive in money. to know exactly who the enemy is, exactly who the enemy is. You want to call it fundamental Islam. We can come up with a name, right? I like Islamists or jihadis, or the term we coined, I think at the Ayman Institute, was Islamic totalitarians. People who use Islam to advocate for totalitarian ideology and acting on that ideology. All right, let's see anything else on Russia or Ukraine quickly. All right, Colt Savage says, the only pro-Russia people I've encountered online, and there's a lot of them, everybody I know in real life supports you crazy? No, you support something. Supports Ukraine. Even horrible people who are like anti-Semitic and ultra-nationalistic support Ukraine. Well, yeah, but there seem to be a lot of them online. All right. All right. So let's just general topics. We will start with Michael. By the way, we're $287 short. So, was it $15, $20 questions? We'll do it. $15, $20 questions. Also, we could do just $5, $50 questions. Would get us very, very close. So, nobody's done a $50 contribution today. Nobody's asked a $50 question. That would be great, and would get priority. I mean, Catherine is threatening to go to bed in tears. It's sad. Don't let that happen. All right, Michael asks, how has the free sector of society been able to outpace the unfree sector? Politics keep getting worse, but technology gets better every decade. Maybe politicians don't actually want to destroy everything. Well, I mean, they haven't got around to it yet. So those sectors where technology has gotten better dramatically are those sectors that are being the least regulated. Technology. Silicon Valley is being underregulated. One of the things that is really, really scary about the days to come is the fact that both the left and the right want to regulate the technology industry. We saw the beginning of that with the chip bill that just passed Congress with, I think, 13 or 14 Republicans voting for it, a lot of Republican support. Which is direct government involvement in a really, really crucial sector of technology. They have avoided that in the past, and as a consequence, that sector has boomed. They all want to get in bed with it. So that's one reason. The other reason is that markets, entrepreneurs, are very, very good at figuring ways around regulations. They're just smarter than the politicians and the regulators. So they can't get around all regulations, and they can't get around regulations at no cost. It's expensive. It reduces our quality of life and standard of living. But they do get around many regulations. And because of that, the private sector can continue to grow and thrive and be successful in spite of all the damage that our politicians do to it. All right, free trade. I have to give you credit for properly identifying the irrationality of Trump conservatives. I knew they were bad, but I didn't think they would keep supporting Russia after it launched an explicit genocidal invasion. It doesn't surprise me. They're enamored by authoritarians. They really are. And particularly authoritarians who are European, who claim to represent Christianity. It's hard to beat that combination. Strong, Christian, European, white, Westerns, you talk the Western civilization thing, you got them. You got those conservatives. Now, not all of them. A lot of the pro-Trump conservatives are still anti-Russia. But, a lot of them bought right along with Russia. Shahzad says, have you heard of Upside Down from the show Stranger Things? What do you think of it represents? I have not, sorry. I haven't seen Stranger Things. I think I watched part of the first season. I found it too childish, I don't know. I couldn't get into it, so I never watched it. Andy, looking at moving to Austin, Texas in the next few years, any thoughts? Is it going blue, same direction as New York City? Austin has always been blue. Austin is a bastion of leftism in Texas. It votes Democratic. It's a university town. It's a government town. So Austin itself is very blue. The outskirts are not. And Austin is the perfect combination of blue and red. That is, Austin is also very, because it's blue, it's secular, it has culture, it has art, it has music, it has all the things that you need to live in a civilized place. And yet it doesn't have the crazy religionists for the most part. So it has a nice combination of red and blue. So I like Austin a lot because of that. And you can live in the outskirts of Austin that are not regulated like a blue place. They're regulated like a red state, but you can work and you can hang out in Austin, which is where all the cool kids are. So I love Austin. It's a great city. You have to get through the summers. The summers are not easy. I am going to be in Austin a lot in the years to come. I'll be there I'm doing an event in Austin in the very end of November. I'm doing a debate discussion comparing C.S. Lewis and Ayn Rand. C.S. Lewis's diagnostic of the problems in society post-World War II, and Ayn Rand's views of the problems of the world post-World War II. So C.S. Lewis versus Ayn Rand should be a really cool event. I'm looking forward to it. So that's at the end of November, and then I'm there again in January, and then again in June. So I'm in Austin quite a bit. All right. Super chat is still slow, guys. Where are my whales when I need them? I'm not going to be, who knows when the next show is going to be. I fly to Asia on Tuesday. I don't think I'm going to do a show tomorrow. I fly to Asia on Tuesday. From Asia, it's going to be impossible to do shows. I mean, I'll do some. It'll be early in the morning my time. I'll have to get up really early. So there's no point in saving up for the rest of the month because there are barely going to be any shows the rest of the month. Then I'm going to be in South America, but really, really busy. So I don't know how many shows we're going to have from now to the end of the month. I get back here on October 2nd. So the next show is probably from home. The next show from this location is October 3rd, probably. So I'm not threatening to quit. I'm just saying, if you want to support the show in September, tonight's the night. I should have said it's at the beginning of the show, but tonight's the night. Yep. I will be in South Korea, Japan, Brazil, and Argentina. I'll be giving talks in those 4 countries. Argentina, Brazil, South Korea, and Japan. And you can find information about all the events on my website, YaronBrookShow.com, and on Ayn Rand Institute's website. All right, I guess my appeal is not working. All right, I'm not. Is blocking someone on social media, Fred Hopper asks, a type of economic power, since it is part of someone's right to voluntary association? Absolutely. Absolutely. It is not political power. Now, when is it political power? It's political power when the government tells you to block somebody. And then it's the government that's violating the First Amendment. And there's actually a lawsuit right now by the Attorney General of, I forget which states, 2 southern states, are suing the federal government, claiming that the federal government has violated the First Amendment by putting pressure on social media to block certain information, to block certain people. Now, I think that's exactly the right approach. I've said from the beginning, don't complain about social media. Don't attack social media companies, because all you're doing is giving more power to the politicians to then intervene in running those social media platforms. What you need to do is attack the politicians, attack the government for intervening, for violating our First Amendment rights. They are the bad guys. It is they who are violating our rights. They must be condemned. They must be attacked. And they must be sued. So it's really, and the suit is actually going well. They've subpoenaed a lot of documents from the government. The judge seems to be favorable towards getting those subpoenas. They want emails from people like Fauci, who might have been telling Twitter, you can't, take this stuff off, or don't say this, or whatever. Government officials putting pressure on social media, that needs to be exposed, and that needs to be stopped, and there needs to be a lawsuit, and the courts need to say, you cannot do this. It's a violation of First Amendment. I don't care if it's COVID. I don't care if there's terrorism. You cannot tell social media, unless it's a national security issue, what they can or cannot post. Whoops. All right. Michael Reveling asks, my son is getting ready to choose a college. Any guidance on choosing a college? What to look for and what to avoid? Do you have a favorite college? It depends on what he wants to study. So I'm going to assume he's not going to study STEM. Because if he's going to study STEM, and by the way, thank you, Carolina. Really, really appreciate 500 Mexican pesos. Is it pesos? Really appreciate that. Thank you. I think it's about $30, something like that, $30, $40. So thank you. So it depends what he wants to study. I'm assuming it's not STEM, because STEM, you just go to the best school that'll teach it, MIT, Caltech, depending on what STEM, depending on what exactly. So STEM is relatively easy, I think. Assume it's your humanities. In that case, then you want to be very, very careful. Because the better the school is, the worse the curriculum is going to be. The more brainwashing, the more BS he's going to get, the more cutting-edge leftist progressive ideology he's going to get. I would look at, I think programs like, there's a program at, there's a program called the Lyceum Scholars at Clemson University, which I think is phenomenal. Now, granted, I, until very recently, sat on the board of directors of that program. It's run by the Clemson Institute for Capitalism, which I was on the board of, so I'm, call me biased, but maybe I just know a lot. So that's an excellent, phenomenal college. There's St. John and other schools that have great books programs. There are new universities popping up that are offering a more, call it pro-American curriculum. So there are a lot of universities like that. I think Clemson is probably the best of them. It's Brad Thompson's program, and it's very competitive to get in. But if you can get in, I think it's definitely worth going. And then, if you want to study economics, then you've got George Mason University. Clemson also has a good economics department. So there's a number of different programs out there, depending on what he's interested in, that are worthwhile, are definitely worthwhile. If he wants to study history or political science, you might want to ask Brad Thompson, what are the best programs today? There's some good universities with some good professors who teach that, but you have to be careful again. All right. Thank you, Michael. Oh, we got another one from Michael Reveling. He said, did you do a show on Biden's anti-Make America Great Again speech? If you did, when? If not, what did you think? I did not. What did I think? I mean, I liked a lot of it. I agreed with a lot of it. But it came out of Biden's mouth, so it's useless and pathetic and offensive. But I think his observation about Trump and about many of his supporters is right on. Is right on. So I didn't want to really do it because I didn't want to give it too much credibility, because Biden is such a nobody and a nothing, and a speech like that from him is just, it just feeds the bad guys, I think. Well, yes. All right, Justin, thank you for the 50 Australian dollars. Really appreciate that. If a vastly intellectually superior alien species held the objectivist view that their individual flourishing was paramount, would they be morally justified to eliminate the relatively inconsequential human species if we stood in the way of their aims? Oh, wow, Vadim. Vadim just came in with $300. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. Wow. That is incredibly generous. Thank you. No, I don't think so. And the reason is that imagine you're this amazing species, an amazing, that have this amazing knowledge and amazing ability and dedication to reason and rationality. And you encounter a species that has a lot less ability than you, but that has the potential, at least in principle, to use reason to achieve something. Then it would make sense for you to trade with that species, educate that species, teach that species how to better utilize their reason, how to maximize the use of their philosophy. Remember, any species that's going to be superior to humans is still going to have free will. They're going to have reason. Their superiority is going to come from either senses and skills that we don't have, or just the superior horsepower, superior intelligence, but that will still require free will. It will still require the willingness to engage in that. And they would necessarily have to have an appreciation for humans who might not be as intelligent as they are, might not have all the, let's say, senses they have, but are in principle similar to them. And therefore, I think they would want to trade with us. So we wouldn't be able to trade with them at that very top level, but there's certainly levels in which we should be able to contribute. It doesn't make sense, I think, to eliminate a species that can reason in the name of being selfish. I don't think if we're all truly self-interested, rationally self-interested, there's no conflict of interest between us. There's no conflict of interest between us and the superior species. They're better educated, they're more advanced. Well, but they can educate us and they can make us more advanced. And they can trade with us in the meantime. All right, Roosevelt, thank you for the $50. Really appreciate it. Anonymous user, thank you. I've seen a number of small contributions from you. Really appreciate it. God, we've gone well over $1,000 now. This is fantastic. All right, Shazbot wants me to review A Glorious Dawn sung by Carl. How can Carl Sagan sing a song? It's just something wrong with that. All right, I've added it. I know I still owe you 2 episodes of Star Trek, and I owe somebody music, song Compliance by Muse. So I've got 2 songs and 2 episodes of Star Trek. The episodes of Star Trek I've already downloaded from Amazon Video to watch on my flight to South Korea. So those are ready. I will watch them on the plane on my way to South Korea. So one of the first episodes I do from Asia will cover those 2 episodes. And then the songs I will also try to download or at least have access to so I can listen to them on the plane. If not, I'll listen to them in Asia probably. I probably won't have time before I leave. But thank you, Shazbad. Very, very generous, and you have been with a lot of this. I really appreciate it. Fred Harper writes, Jose Yanza asks if that new University of Austin will have an objectivist course. Not now. That is not at the launch, as far as I can tell. There was some talk of that, but nothing ever came. Focus on Ayn Rand University. Let's make Ayn Rand University the best, the greatest university in the world. Let's make it humongous. So I am all for promoting Ayn Rand University. You guys should all, some of you should be full graded students, and the rest of you should be auditors. I mean, the courses are fantastic. I'm going to be teaching 2 courses, introductory and then advanced course on public speaking. And I will be doing those in the summer of next year. But I intend to also develop maybe a class on the New Right, or maybe a class on national conservatives, or the intellectual origins of the New Right, or something like that, which I might teach in the 23-24 school year. But Ayn Rand University is terrific. We don't need a YBS university, because you already have the YBS shows. They are a university. All right, on the Leroy. Much recent opposition to monarchy has been due to monarchy's perceived imperialism, racism, and wealth. As an admitted opponent of the monarchy, are these correct views? If not, what are the proper reasons to oppose a monarchy? Well, the fundamental, I think, reason to oppose a monarchy is that it's arbitrary. That is, there's this family, an individual, who are anointed with some extra special powers over other people's life in some way, small or large. Why? You know, just because they were born with particular genes, I mean, why? It doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter what they've done in their life, doesn't matter if it's deserved or not. You're queen because your father was king. So it's just irrational. It's undeserved, it's unjust. And then what do you need a monarch for? Now, in the past, monarchs ruled. And that's bad because it's anti-freedom. It's authoritarian. But in an era where monarchs are symbolic, what are they symbolic of? Of a past where they ruled? Of an empire that oppressed people's individual rights? The fact that people are irrational and therefore like them? None of those are good reasons. Sorry. Monarchy is a waste of money, a waste of time, a waste of energy, a waste of focus. And all it reminds us of is of a time when monarchs oppressed us, stomped on us, violated our rights. So I can't think of a single reason to have a monarch today. Sorry, Brits, got to get rid of that monarchy. It's time. Queen Elizabeth, the last probably good monarch you'll ever have, is gone. Maybe she's the only good monarch you ever had, is gone. It's time to get rid of the entire institution. Turn the whole thing into a tourist attraction and get rid of any semblance that this has any meaning at all. All right, we've got under $20 Super Chat questions. We're going to go fast through these. How did you get easy access to Japan as Japan opened? That wasn't easy. I had to get a visa, had to submit a bunch of paperwork. I basically am going there to give seminars and to give talks. So it's a business trip. It's not a tourist trip. Japan is somewhat open as of September 3rd. It's more open than it was before. I don't need a pre-flight test, COVID test. That's good. So it's a lot better than it was. But it's still, Japan is still, they're still limiting the number of people visiting. They're still requiring visas. They are still, tourists are not really that welcome unless they're in a group. So there are all kinds of regulations on who cannot get in. Because I was traveling on, quote, business, it is business, it wasn't hard to get a visa. All right, James Taylor asked, off topic, but is imposing a 30-day waiting period before you purchase a firearm a rights violation? So impulsive, people don't just buy a gun and do something heinous right then and there. Look, the law is not there to prevent us from doing impulsive things. It can't. Right? It's not the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is to prevent rights violations. And the question is, does a 30-day waiting period prevent rights violations in and of itself? And it probably does not. I am not against regulating guns, but I'm not sure this is a legitimate way to do it. But I'm open to arguments. I think guns are an interesting, difficult, complex case of how to apply individual rights. Ayn Rand thought the same thing. It's why she basically didn't really comment on gun issues because it was too complex. But I don't think it's right for the government to do that. But what exactly is right and what isn't right, and I think that's murky still in my mind. I don't have a clear view on it. Hopper Campbell says, why was a blatantly irrational neurotic like Kant taken so seriously for so long? As a college student, I knew he was nuts. Well, because he's a genius, because he presented a systematic philosophy, because he presented himself often as the defender of the Enlightenment, a unifier and a completing the Enlightenment. He presented himself that way. And because he was clearly brilliant, you know, and there was nobody who came after him challenged those ideas that he had. Nobody came after him, ripped to shreds his books. They all went, yeah, and let me do this spin on it. And you know, Hegel and Schopenhauer and Marx and all the rest of them. That's what they did. They just took Kant and did a spin on him. But nobody rejected his ideas until Ayn Rand. And I think the people who thought he was nuts left philosophy. Mr. Remorseless. Yaza, you said Uncut Gems was Yaza? I'm Yaron, not Yaza. You said Uncut Gems was naturalism at its worst. Please expound. What does naturalism means for you? Naturalism is the, you know, philosophically or aesthetically, is the rejection of free will. It is the presentation of the world as it is. If you think of Aristotle's view of aesthetics, present the world as it could and should be, recognizing that people can be different, can attain great things. Uncut Gems is the world as it is, with losers who where everything is inevitable, where they can't rise above what's happening. And he has to, you know, everything about it is, in a sense, inevitable, predictable, deterministic. The main character is pathetic, has no guts, has no free will, has no energy. So in that sense, it's naturalistic, in the sense that it presents just life as it is, a slice of life of just somebody who gets into trouble. And as always, the trouble just spirals and spirals and spirals and makes it worse and worse and worse. Now, on top of that, it is filmed in the most naturalistic way possible, which means that it is filmed as if you are right there in the action, looking at it and moving around with it. So it's moving all the time and jumping all the time. And it's as if you've got a guy who's running around with a camera, you know, following the action. It's as if it's in real world. It's as if it's a documentary, following this guy around with a handheld camera, an old style with no what do you call it? What do you call the motion adjuster? So I mean, I thought it was it's a very well-made movie. It's very well made, but it's a horrible movie. In theme, it's a horrible movie, and in the feeling it gives you. I mean, what's the point of that movie? What's the point? Don't screw up, because screw-ups lead to greater screw-ups, and ultimately you'll die from them. And all filmed. I hate this jumping around, jittery way of filming movies. That's stylistically naturalism. Versus a TV series I like and have mentioned many times on my show, Mr. Sunshine, where the shots are slow, purposeful, every shot is composed, every person is where they offer a reason, every color choice, every angle, every movement is chosen, conveys something. There's none of that in Uncut Gems. You're jumping, you have no time to absorb what's going on. It's purposefully putting you in the midst of the action, but that's not what a movie should be doing. It should get you contemplate the action so you can emotionally respond without feeling sick because you're right there wobbling all over the place. Vadim asks, what do you think of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Very good cinematography. Look, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is very well made. You know, it's the great spaghetti movie, the great spaghetti western. But and cinematography is beautiful. The music by, is it Marcione, is magnificent. All the music in the spaghetti westerns are just phenomenal. But it's a movie with no point. Why is anybody, I mean, there's no values being presented there. It's a mockery, a purposeful mockery of the Western. It's the gunslinger who's shooting up the place, and he's shooting up bad guys, we think, but does he think they're bad guys? Is it because they're bad guys? Is he a good guy? Does anybody really care that he's good? Is he good just because he wants to steal the loot rather than anybody else? What makes him good? It's an anti-Western Western. And that was the purpose. The purpose of the spaghetti Westerns was to mock, in a sense, Hollywood Westerns and to make them Italian in that way. But some of the cinematography is truly beautiful, and the music, my favorite part of those Westerns, of the spaghetti Westerns, is the music. And Clint Eastwood was good in them. Francis asks, how do you think Miss Rand would have reacted to 9/11? Well, I mean, I hope she would have reacted in a similar way to the way Leonard Peikoff did and the way I did. I don't want to compare myself to Ayn Rand, but everything I did, I hope, is consistent with Ayn Rand's ideas, and I intended it to be. And she would have just been deeper and smarter and more cutting through the nonsense. She would have cut through it. I mean, I think she would have responded like Leonard. And if you read Leonard's statement after 9/11, that we put out in a full-page ad in the Washington Post and the New York Times, then I think Ayn Rand would have signed off on that. Andrew, $50, thank you. How has the Kantian conflation of reality with unreality affected artistic imagination? Well, it's basically what it's done is it's allowed, in quotes, the artists to detach themselves from reality. It makes possible splashing paint on a canvas. It makes possible just drawing anything you want, just emoting on the page. And it even made possible Picasso, who is a magnificent painter, who then purposefully, but you could say inspired by Kant, decomposes, deconstructs reality, breaks it up. His cubism is breaking it up. And it's still art. What Picasso does is art, and some of it is pretty powerful. But epistemologically, what he's doing is he's decoupling our senses from reality. And he's projecting that back to us. And in that sense, he's doing what Kant, I mean, and if you think about I think even the Impressionists are trying to, our brain integrates all the stuff that it gets from the senses, so let's go to what the senses actually provide us. They just provide us dots of color, this pointillism, or they just, impressions. We don't actually see reality, we just have impressions of reality. All of it is inspired by this separation of reality from our senses, a separation from reality from reason. And that's how it's inspired these artists, but by inspiring them, it's, I think, ultimately destroyed art. Art depends on reality. It depends on artists having a proper conception of reality and then having values related to reality, deep, important values related to reality. Scott asked, thoughts on Dave Smith? I mean, Dave's a nice guy. I've met Dave. He's a nice guy. He's funny, but he's wrong. He's an anarchist. I think anarchists are, I think it's a horrible position. It's one of the worst positions you can have politically and morally. From what I understand, he is kind of a paleo-anarchist. So he is the worst kind of anarchist because he's, on top of being an anarchist, he's anti-immigration. He's pro, I think, Russia, or at least anti-Ukraine, pro-Russia, whatever. Kind of a nationalist anarchist, which is like a mishmash combination. So I think he represents, and he's also like a lot of these anarchists who are anti-war, unless it's Russian war, and then they're pro it. He's anti-American. I think they're all anti-American. They think that America is the worst. I mean, I take it back to my Rothbard, who used to drink a toast every time an American pilot was shot down over Vietnam. That's how much he hated America. You can be against the war in Vietnam, as Ayn Rand was, and still A, want America to win, or B, if it brings the troops home, bring them safely. But that whole wing of the libertarian movement hates America, and there's a reason for it. They hate all successful countries, all successful governments, successful by the standard of human success, human flourishing. They hate America, they hate Israel, they generally hate Western Europe because they're successful. And they somehow have respect for authoritarians. They're not against tyranny. Again, Murray Rothbard celebrated the victory of North Vietnam over South Vietnam because communism was the will of the people. The communism that Vietnam was now enslaved under when North Vietnam won was the will of the people. So they're not against tyranny. They're against American-imposed tyranny, but they're not against tyranny. Quite the opposite. I think ultimately the more nihilistic type of anarchist, which I think the Mises Institute is part of, there's a nihilistic streak there, are fundamentally pro-tyranny. Their kind of anarchy leads inevitably to tyranny. Robert asks, suppose Donald Trump could save America by stepping aside, accepting a lesser role, and letting another leader take the spotlight and credit. Do you think he would? No. No way. Or would he let America burn? He would let America burn. He and some of his followers, again, have a certain nihilistic streak. And in Trump, it's not so much nihilism as it's this narcissism. He has to be at the center of everything. It's all that really matters. Any particular position, any particular thing is irrelevant. It's that narcissistic view. Mr. Muffin, how do you read, study deep topics? Do you take notes, underline, highlight? Yeah, I do all of the above. I mean, I read books, articles, I underline, I underscore. If I'm going to study something deeply, I don't listen to it on tape. I listen to on tape stuff that I just want to get because I won't retain it. But if I underline stuff, I retain it better, and then I can go back and find it and read it again and emphasize it. So read. After 9/11, I read, 20, 30 books on Islam, 20, 30 books on the Middle East, on the history of the Middle East. That's how I did my courses on the Middle East and on the history of Islamism, which are available for free on YouTube or on the podcast channel. So you all can enjoy them for free. Oz Fast Buy. All right. Thank you for talking to Alex at Playing with Fire. For young men lacking confidence to talk to women, do you have any general advice? I mean, like mindset or self-esteem, not pickup lines. Yeah, I mean, it's very general advice. And that is, well, first, look, to be attractive to somebody else, first you have to be attractive to yourself. You have to like yourself. You have to have self-esteem. So the thing you need to work on is your self-esteem, is gaining that metaphysical confidence in your own efficaciousness. Now, not in a particular skill, not in everything. I mean, I can't windsurf, never will be able to windsurf. That's not what self-esteem is about. Self-esteem is that I belong on this earth. I can learn what I need to learn. I can survive. I can thrive. I can do it. I don't know everything. There's a ton I don't know. Huge amount I don't know. But I can learn it. If I need to know it, I can learn it. I can figure it out. If I need to figure it out, I'll figure it out. If I need to, I'll talk to the right kind of experts. I can survive on this planet and survive well. You've got to develop that mentality. And again, I would read Rand, I would read her ethics, I would take her virtues seriously, because the virtues are what help you attain this kind of self-esteem. They're the virtues that lead to the values of reason, purpose, and self-esteem. So you've got to have a certain confidence in, I'm a good guy. I'm a fundamentally good guy. And I want a relationship. I want somebody who's good. I want somebody who's efficacious. I want somebody with self-esteem. So you have to know what you want in a woman. I could never date a submissive, yes, sir, let me massage your feet, let me cook you dinner kind of woman. They have to be your equal. You have to be able to match you. They have to be able to be a challenge. They have to be able to challenge you to be the best that you can be. Part of what love does, romantic love does, and a good relationship does, is it makes you want to be better. You want to be the best. So develop those skills, know what you want in a woman. And then it's intimidating starting a relationship. It's intimidating going to speak to somebody new, but if you know that this is something you value, relationship, if you know that you are fundamentally good and you know what kind of person you want, then just go and try. And you're not going to find it easily. It's going to take a while. It's going to take some work. It's going to take an hit and misses, like everything in life. You're going to fail. Failure is something you learn from. And that's what you need to embrace failure. That's part of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. It's part of what it takes to be the best that you can be in whatever profession you have. You have to embrace the fact that sometimes you'll fail, because part of that is the need to try, the need to put yourself out there, to challenge yourself, to push the envelope, to try new things, knowing that some of them will not be good. That's fine. All right. I hope that's helpful. Fast, bye. Frank, I recall a professor said the United States deserved the attacks, and even Bill Maher got in trouble for calling the hijackers heroic. What is behind this? Well, it's behind it is a hatred of America, and a lack of understanding of what America is, and a sympathy for the downtrodden, altruism, a sympathy for those who don't have. I mean, Ron Paul said the same thing. Ron Paul said, in a sense, we deserved it. It was our fault. So it's a lack of understanding of what America is and what it represents and what the world is like, and what the terrorists in this case actually stand for, represent, believe. It's a certain type of nihilism too. Catherine, did you go to Ground Zero 9/11 site with the museum? Yes, I did. Quite powerful. My friend said there are phone recordings from the voice mails and dispatch calls. If you did, what do you think? I think it's very powerful. I think everybody should go. I think it's a day that needs to be remembered. I think it's a day that changed America. I think if we're going to change America back, we need to understand that day, and we need to to fix America and to make sure it responds differently. And I think part of the horror of what they represented is in that museum. And people should go and listen to that, and then remember the cowardly politician that made 9/11 possible. Would have never happened if not for our cowardness. And then the response is going to make the next 9/11 possible. So next time you'll know where it came from. Stephen gave me $2 for my intellectual G-string. I have no idea what that means. Francis, please say a few words on the heroes of Flight 93. Yeah, I mean, Flight 93 they are truly heroic from everything we know of what happened on that plane. They had already heard, as the plane was heading towards D.C., it had been hijacked. The hijacker was in the cockpit. They'd taken over. They had box cutter knives. And the passengers had their cell phones. They were violating FAA regulations, by the way, by using their cell phones on a plane, but forgivable, I guess. And they had already heard that the planes had hit the World Trade Center. Maybe they had heard about the Pentagon, I can't remember. But basically they knew what the fate of the plane was. They knew that the plane was going to be crashed into something that would kill a lot of people. And they had a choice to make at that point. They could have waited and died like sheep, hoped that somehow it wouldn't happen, that they were wrong, that these guys were different, whatever. Or they could fight. And they chose to fight. They chose to be heroes. They chose to take on evil and fight it, even knowing that it would probably lead to their death, but they were going to die anyway. They were going to fight to prevent the plane from killing other people. They were going to fight for the small, tiny probability that they could actually prevent the plane from crashing at all. But they fought to prevent another Pentagon, to prevent another World Trade Center. And, you know, the rallying call of that, from what we know of that flight, because on the call they said they're trying to decide what to do, and then the call is, let's roll. Let's roll. And that should be our call. To win this intellectual war, to win this philosophical war, to win America. Let's roll. Stop just sitting on your butt. Stop just chatting on chats. Stop just being lazy about this. This is life or death for all of us. Let's roll. Support the people who are doing the frontline fighting for you. Don't stay silent in your own life. Roll. Fight. Stand up to the bastards. Don't let them destroy your world. Don't let them destroy your country. Don't let them destroy the good people in this country. Go out there and fight. And fighting in this case means an intellectual battle. Always has been, always will be. And if you're not equipped to it, then support the people who are. If you are equipped with it, use that. Don't let it go. Let's roll. I wish that was the end of the show. That would be good, but Colt has another question. All right, Colt. One thing I wanted to do in life is teach history, but I also want to be an intellectual to confront the right and left. Any advice? Also, well, I may not always agree with you. I hope I'm one of the good guys. I hope so too. I think you are. History is a great way to be an intellectual. Teach history. Become a history teacher. Teach history and then go out into the world and use history to help people understand the world in which they live, to help them understand the past, to help them understand the future, help them understand the values that they're fighting for. History is one of the most important fields where we need objectivity, we need the proper approach, we need to understand our past so we can understand the present and the future, so we can fight for the right present and the right future. So go study history, become a history teacher, and then use that to teach your kids, to teach your students, but then go beyond that to everybody else. All right, everybody, thank you. Please don't forget to like the show before you leave. It really helps the algorithm. We've got 121 people watching live and 80 thumbs up. We could do better than that. Hopefully, we had more than 80 people who liked the show from the 300-400 people that have watched it so far today. Let's see. But it really does help. Just that little click of a button really helps. If you want to support the show, you can support it at YourOnBookShow.com/support. It's one of the ways you can fight is by arming me to fight for you. You can also support me on Patreon. And thank you for all the super chatters today. We crushed the goal. You made Catherine's day. We raised over $1,100 today, so that's fantastic. I will see you from Asia. I will be in Asia when I do the next show. I won't do one tomorrow. It will probably be on, they might be on weird hours. Certainly there'll be weird hours for me. So just be patient with me. I'll try to do them when I'm available, when I'm out there. I will thank you, Roosevelt. I really appreciate the support. I will do them also from Latin America, from South America, and I'm there. So I'll do them sporadically when I can, when I wake up early enough, when I plan for it. I will try to let you know, but I won't always be able to let you know well in advance because of the timing differences. I mean, it's bizarre to me that when I'm in Asia, I'm 16 hours ahead of California. And you can tell just from that, you try to do the math. How do I do a show that's in a reasonable time for California and a reasonable time for Tokyo? Hard to do a phone call, never mind a whole show. All right. I will see you from Japan. Wish me a good trip. Long flight. Shazbot. I'll catch up on all the things I owe you and one other person. And yeah, have a great night, everybody. Have a great week. I probably won't talk to you until Wednesday or Thursday from Tokyo. Bye, everybody.